Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm with a very special guest today, my astrology role model, the person who I follow and got super into astrology because of Haley Comet, founder of Haley Comet Astrology. Welcome, Haley.
So happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. I love the stars on your nails. She's got some stars on her nails, if you want to zoom in and see. As you know, we're astrology girlies here, so we need to know, what are your big three?
So I am a Pisces sun, Virgo moon. You and I both are born during full moons. And then I'm a Virgo rising as well. So my moon and rising are aligned in the same sign.
And for people who don't know, by the way, we're going to be passing around a mini mic, so you'll be seeing that Mercury isn't retrograde. As you know, we have mutable placements here, so we are just rolling with the punches. But for people who don't know, what does it mean if you're born during a full moon?
So if you ever observe that your sun or your moon or anyone that you're looking up has their sun and moon in opposite signs, it means that they're born during a full moon, as the sun and moon were in complete opposition to one another, 80-degree angle. And it definitely can be special, which Jessica and I can attest to, but it can be challenging because the sun and moon are making an opposition to one another, and so sometimes it can signal quite a bit of unrest, restlessness, and needs in clash. Also, it's considered within our chart that sun is more of a paternal energy, moon is more of a maternal energy, so it also can represent either perceived or experienced differences amongst parents, or feeling like we had to be different things for our different caretakers. But the beauty of being born during a full moon is that full moon individuals typically do have a desire to live very full lives and adventure and experience. They experience a lot of their growth in the reflection of self and other. Like the moon is the reflection of the sun, so a lot of times they do attract a lot of really key partnerships. A lot of their growth shows up through the balance of self and other, but they also have to find balance within themselves because they can experience a lot of polarities and opposition. So it's an interesting energy to have within our birth charts. But I love fellow full moon babies. I feel like I'm biased, but I feel like we're so fun.
We are the most fun. Thank you for going over that, Haley. And I do love the confidence, I feel like, that comes from the push-pull of the opposition, where you really get to learn the ways that axis, the signs on that axis, fight with each other, and also the ways that they have similar strengths. You know what I mean? So I think that that's really cool. I look at the axis of Pisces and Virgo as the axis of the healer. And so we have this metaphysical, astrological healer sun that you have. And then you have this more physical body and health and wellness healer moon. And I know that you started your practice by teaching yoga, which I think is really such a special, cool synchronicity. Well, today we're going to be getting into astrology for parenting. We're going to be talking about different astrological phases and rites of passage that we have. Haley's going to be sharing them with us and how you can tune into them as a parent for your child. Also, if you are a child of a parent, as we all are, it's also okay to watch this for your own self-reflection. Look back, shifts that you were going through at certain times. I feel like astrology can be used retroactively for a lot of healing and empowerment in that way, and we'll get to what that would look like later. There's one more thing I want to share about the sun and the moon, if I can. So I'm curious if you've noticed any siblings that you've read, if they have similar placements in the sun and the moon. I can speak from experience that myself and my sister were twins, so it's more obvious we'd have the same sun and moon. But our younger brother, who's 11 years younger, has the same moon. And all of our moons are in Sagittarius, and actually our dad is a Sagittarius sun, and our mom has Venus in Sagittarius. So I thought that was really trippy, how we would all end up with the same moon sign. But I'm curious for you if you've come across that.
Yeah, that's just very common, because it's also important to know that when we look, like I highlighted above, sun can be associated, and there's other facets within a birth chart, but a very simple understanding is that sun can represent how it is that we experienced father energy, paternal energy, and moon can represent how it is that we experienced mom energy, maternal energy. And so it's interesting too, in that sometimes siblings' experiences will be united. Makes sense, it is the same people. And sometimes it's you can have the same parents, but they raise the children in such different ways. It talks about moon, it's how it is that we experienced that. And so it makes sense, the alignment. And it also, sometimes it's it was so different being raised by these caretakers at this particular age, hence the differences in that. But I do feel a lot of times there are dominant themes. One of the favorite readings that I do is family readings, and particularly going back in generations, because it's like we inherit so much. Like certain patterns will, like aspect patterns will show up consistently. Like my family, we have a pattern of like Sun Saturn that just shows up generation to generation.
Really?
Yeah, Sun conjunct Saturn shows up and shows up. And so it'll be interesting to see when that, you know, completes, because a lot of times it can represent like certain like karma that is wrapping up, or just like certain patterns that have been released. But yes, we absolutely see like unions in terms of, or similarities when it comes to like siblings, and then sometimes like differences, and both are fascinating to see.
Yeah. How cool of you to go through your family lineage in that way and see that you all had that Sun Saturn aspect. That's so interesting. I'd be curious if, you know, if any of your siblings have children, or if you end up becoming a mom too, like within the new generation, like if that kind of continues to come through, or if like it would be cool next level. Hold on. Okay, so brief interlude with our dogs. This is Blaze, he's a Leo. This is Banana, she's a Cancer. I wanted to ask you, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I wonder if there's going to be like a new generation of astrology that talks about like karmic healing and healing, and to see like how do the placements. Cool. So yeah, we can just kind of start chatting about those rites of passage. Tell us about, obviously we have birth is the place. Sorry. That see. Thank you. Do you want to say something? Okay. So obviously we have the first, which is, okay, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you read like conception charts?
I do not. I believe I think of like rising as first breath, because it's the portion of the sky that's rising in the east. And it's like our introduction into this planet. And I also believe that every soul is born at the right time. Like I was meant to be an Aquarius. I hung in there. I was like, I'm going to be a Pisces. I'm going to be born on the full moon. And I think there's a lot of significance of when we are. So I just read in terms of the first breath, the moment that they are born. And that's why.
I love that. I really do feel that too. I agree. Like we chose our birth charts, and I felt like when I was pregnant, my daughter was born at 42 weeks and 2 days. And people kept being like, when are you going to induce? When are you going to induce? And I said, whatever she wants to, you know, and I figured that would manifest as either like, if there was a health issue, do you know what I mean? Like that made her want to be born earlier. But I figured I'm like, she's just hanging on to be a Pisces. And then she kept hanging on to, you know, be born on a new moon. And that's okay. I love that. Just like allowance of divine timing in our own birth charts, and trusting the soul's choice to choose the natal chart that we did. And therefore we're also choosing our transits as well, because they're aspecting to our natal chart. So that's really interesting. So we're born, we have our natal chart. Tell us about the first rite of passage that we go through astrologically.
So the first major one that's fascinating, obviously we have a solar return. That's our birthday. Every single year, the sun moves in a very predictable fashion. So we know about birthday, which is a celebration of self. It's our solar return. What also happens around that year mark, and again, sun is around visibility and what happens during our birthdays. We get celebrated. There's an energy around, you know, baby's first birthday. There's like this energy of celebration of self and life, which is very solar. What also happens around a year, but it does differ depending on if there's Mercury retrograde and things like this, but is your Mercury return. So it's the first time that Mercury returns to where it is within the natal chart, which will happen around the 1 year mark. And whereas sun is around visibility and self and life force energy and celebration, Mercury is around words and thoughts. And so I found it fascinating learning that most littles will speak their first words between 10 months to 14 months, which like directly coincides with the Mercury return.
That is so wild. It makes me wish that I had like an astrological app. It's like there's Wonder Weeks that I don't know if any parents do that too, that tell you about like their developmental leaves. It'd be so cool to have one like linked to astrology. So maybe we get to make that, or we know somebody who can. But I'm thinking about my daughter's first word was mama, you know. Lucky me, obviously, no, but I'm always curious, like, okay, like what were like those words that she said? The first ones were mama, dada. It's just so cute, like that being in her environment. She has Mercury in Aries. So I want to ask you about that, because when she was first born, she was a really quiet baby. Super quiet. People used to joke around about her crying. They're like, oh, you're so lucky, because she would do this little, like, really small, like, little cry. And now that I think about it, I swear around, like, that 10-month period, she would Like that's when she was like crawling more. She was learning how to walk, and when she would fall down, it was like so loud and vibrant. And she also started like babbling a lot, and just like would burst out into like conversations. So I'm curious for the parents listening, like maybe you can explore what was going on during that around that like 10 to 14-month period with your little one. Did they say their first word during that period? What was their communication like? And I would empower you to pull up their natal chart. I like to use the Time Passages app, but there's so many different apps and softwares you can use for free or without cost. And just see like what sign is their Mercury in. That will tell you a little bit more about how their voice is, how quickly or slowly they think, how they process intellectual things, but also like what does their voice sound like and how do they like to be communicated to. Something I found with my daughter is she likes it when I'm loud and like bubbly, and she loves like environments where people are like yelling or singing, and very Mercury and Aries where maybe a traditional baby, if somebody had Mercury and Pisces, they want to be like sung to and like read poetry quietly or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And understanding your child's Mercury is so essential around, yes, understanding the sort of auditory, verbal environments that they like to be around, as well as their own speaking. Like our first Mercury return is when we really get in touch with our words and our thoughts. And again, we have many Mercury returns. We all have them at like once a year. So even to a personal level, just observing, I always like around my Mercury return, it's really helpful to learn around certain topics that I want to dive into within that upcoming Mercury cycle, or tap into certain things that I want to communicate. It's a time that we're more aware around our ability to be like messengers on this planet and want to share that. And so the next major milestone is our Mars return. So now that we're aware of the sun has returned, we're aware of Mercury. Venus return will happen around ages like 1.5 to, again, it does vary based on if there is a Venus retrograde, but that will happen around that time as well. But a major one is Mars return, which will happen around age 2. And Mars is our assertion, it's our drive. And so with our Mars return, again, we're aware of our mind now, we're aware somewhat of self. And with Mars, it's like our being aware of our ability to get what it is that we want or what it is that we desire when it comes to Mars energies. A lot of times you'll hear, and this is not coming from my words or my thoughts on this, but like terrible twos, just because it is a time. It's like, how do I get my way? And how can I assert my will? How can I make things happen for myself? Because there's an awareness of that and ability to do that because of our Mars returning to exactly where it is within the natal chart.
I love that awareness of how do I get what I want and what are the different phases I can, like, how can I get what I want basically? And I do know that in your first year of life, there is like, children start to learn what they can do to get what they want. I forgot what the theme or the terminology, I guess, in like child psychology is called pattern recognition. So they can see like, oh, like when I yell and scream my Mercury and Aries head off, mom doesn't really like that. But when I like come up to her and I make a silly face, she always like laughs, and they can start to see like, ooh, like these are the different things we can do. And I think it's also interesting. I'm curious your take on this. So you're in a progressed chart, which is kind of like what your soul is evolving into, I would say. I don't really know how else to explain it other than that, so I'm going to leave it at that. It's another way to study yourself and what your soul's learning right now. And the quickest moving planet there would be the moon. And the moon moves every 2.5 years. And so that's why you probably also change every 2.5 years or so, as far as like your emotional needs, the way that you process things, what you need in connection, and what you need to kind of regulate yourself. And so that first progressed lunar return happens around 2.5. So I'm curious, like, you know, you're having this as a 2.5-year-old baby with put ourselves in our baby shoes. We're just figuring out, okay, like this is how I get what I want. But you're also, I wonder if you're also contemplating how what it is that you want is shifting, because the emotional waters are changing too, and like recalibrating to this new energy. So I'm thinking about, just selfishly thinking about my daughter and her progressed lunar return, what sign she's going to be moving into. And I'm like, that is going to be a pretty big shift without getting to her specifics of her chart. So do you have any advice for parents like who have children who are going through their Mars return and also like their progressed lunar return?
That's a great question. And I think, honestly, I would say when it comes to Mars return, we're getting in touch with these Mars themes. one of which is this theme of assertion that we were discussing around how do I get what it is that I want. And again, I love that pattern recognition piece also being a portion of it. And with Mars energy, it's also our anger and, our frustration around when we don't get what we want or what have you. And I think what's important is that it's easy to just generalize these things around like, oh, terrible Tuesday or like a nightmare. But there is an energy around feeling frustrated, not always understanding, like, why can't I have what I want? And I think it's an important age to say, it's okay to feel mad. It's okay to feel your emotions. Like when we think about the progressed moon changing signs likely around this time and the Mars return, it's like Mars is anger and moon has to deal with our full emotional landscape. So it can be a time that littles are a little bit more explosive, temperamental, getting in touch with these different emotions that are coming to the surface. And I think it's going to be important not to vilify that, but like continue to say it's not about not feeling mad. It's about what we do and what we can and cannot do with that, as well as Mars can represent a planet. Well, it does represent a planet of violence, conflict, things like this. And so just also like asserting, like, we don't hit, we don't push. Like, even if you want what it is that you desire, there's other ways that we can go about it. Like, that's also important to echo at that time.
Wow, thank you for that. Like teaching our children, there's an invitation to teach our children, how do you process that anger and that frustration and those more challenging emotions? They don't know. I mean, when we were 2.5, like we didn't know what the hell's going on. You're just like, all of a sudden I feel this emotion. What is this? So what do I do with this? Okay, tell me about the next one.
Okay. So, and there are others I do want to highlight. There's many different milestones, but I wanted to pull out some key ones. Another one that I found fascinating is around age 7, we will have our first Saturn square. We also go through a Saturn square at 21. We typically hear about Saturn return, which is very wide known in terms of these astrological rites of passage and cycles. That happens 28 to 30. But we also have these mini Saturn stories. And you'll often hear about, some people will call it Saturn 7, some people call it 7-year itch. Things get real every 7 years because Saturn squares itself. So like marriages, like homes, businesses, things get real every 7 years because Saturn, where it's transiting, squares Saturn when it was created. And Saturn is around commitment and restriction. So there's an energy every 7 years, our friendships, our commitments, whatever it is that we are building kind of get tested because Saturn is making a harsh aspect to itself. Taking it back to a child's development around Saturn, that Saturn square, we have to think around this time they are in school and there is this awareness around authority, around rules, around, you have to be in your chair. Saturn energy brings in these themes of restriction and also just this energy around how is it that like with the energy of Saturn square, it's also, okay, I have to fit into this particular mold and not necessarily like peer pressure or things like that, but I have to sit in this chair. I have to do these particular things. I can't run around and play. Like I do feel like that age is kind of signified as part of schooling where it's starting to get more structured and rigid. And sometimes Saturn square could be that energy around having to kind of adjust to that.
What do you remember about being 7? Do you have any memories of being 7?
I absolutely do. And what's fascinating is like right when I was thinking about the Saturn square, I was like a couple of things like came to mind around particularly this awareness around I cannot just do whatever it is that I want freely. Like I remember even with wearing certain things, not that Saturn is explicitly connected to clothes, but it's just an example that's coming to mind, was just this energy around wanting to wear, it was like a tutu or something to school and like being this awareness around like, no, we don't do that. Or like I remember someone in the class was like scolded because they were like using the restroom with the door open because you just don't know that these things are wrong. And so there was just like this awareness around, oh, there's different decorum, there's different code of conduct because Saturn is very much around societal regulations and rules. And sometimes Saturn square, it's like, oh, I can wear my tutu dress at home, but like here I can't, which to a child, again, we're all going through this and it's like, why can't I wear my tutu? I like it. But there's just certain expectations. And again, I'm not implying that every school is necessarily like super strict or anything like that, but there's just like an awareness of rules and just different situations and different behaviors that could show up around that. I also feel not to clear on this, but I also feel it's kind of a time where things start to get real in terms of education, things like that. Like I feel like at the time that we're learning to read, it's not like second grade. Maybe.
No, I think so. You know, it's ironic we're talking about this right now because I just saw a post from a mom Facebook group, and she said, "Dear second grade teacher, my baby's still a baby. Like, take some pressure off." Oh, of course, me too. I have this like weird experience. I feel like I had some weird experiences too when I was 7. I remember getting in trouble for laughing too much, and I just would get this like uncontrollable laughter. I got diagnosed with ADHD later in life, but I didn't know that at the time, obviously. And I would be like in timeout, like sit still and don't laugh. And I was like. Okay. I also have like a funny bathroom story. It was like we were putting snow pants on at recess. I grew up in like Bumble, in New York. It was cold, and I thought that you were supposed to take your pants off and then put the snow pants on. And I have this like memory that makes me blush sometimes when I think about it, of the teacher just yelling at me like, "Jessica, keep your pants on." It's like, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Just trying to put my snow pants on, teacher. But yeah, there is, I agree, I do second that. Like, not that I have any children in second grade yet, but just from being in that environment as a kid and also like being around moms, I do think that. It's like, you know, and who knows, like when is the right time to start to introduce these, you know, keeping your pants on with the snow pants rules. Like we don't really know, peeing in, the bathroom with the door open. Like, I mean, yeah, like we keep our door open all the time at home. So I wouldn't be surprised if my daughter thought that that's what you do at school. So it's interesting. I'm picturing the first Saturn square as like this kid in a business suit, with like glasses, like this like kid boss. I can't remember what the movie is with the kid boss.
Boss Baby?
Boss Baby,
Yeah.
yes. That one. We're just getting more serious. So obviously there's a lot of other things happening. Saturn's going to make a bunch of other different aspects for a while. But what is the next like rite of passage that we go through in astrology?
Okay, so another one that does happen at age 9 is the nodal opposition. This also, of course, repeats when we're in our 20s as well. And this is that it's also called a nodal reversal. So it is when the transiting north node is where the natal south node is, and the transiting south node is where the natal north node. It's kind of like this reversal, this kind of like U-turn energy. And this occurs around age 9. And then it also occurs within our 20s. And sometimes there's just this energy around nodal reversal. And again, 9, that's like around 4th grade, 5th grade or so. There just can be this, think of it like crossroads or just like different, there's just like an awareness around self and even just around like social groups. And a lot of times, which again repeats like within our 20s as well, around like who do I want to be around, who do I want to spend time with, who like supports my growth, who does not. Not saying that we're necessarily thinking all that when we're 9, but it does tend to be a time in which there can be some confusion around where am I headed, like who am I, which I don't explicitly recall in my instance feeling that necessarily at 9, but I think it's important for parents perhaps around that age, or like 4th grade, 5th grade, to really like tune into how do the people that you're spending time with, like how do you feel around them? Because a lot of times with nodal reversal, we can let go of certain things, align with certain things, and sometimes there is an expectation around, well, these are my friends, so they have to be my friends, but it's like, did they make you feel good about yourself? Or even just certain like activities will likely be tuned into at this time around, do you want to do violin? Do you want to do soccer? Like it tends to be a time where we're kind of like tapping more into decision making, and particularly with South Node and North Node, sort of this energy of letting go of things that might have like aligned for us, or having to like differentiate where we're going in a sense.
Do you know off the top of your head the next time you have that transit is?
Yeah, so I know it's before the
No, or no, 27. I just had a baby when I turned 27.
Wow, yeah, yep.
And I took a year off from work from literally like my bit. So it's interesting. North Node, I always think of like career. I know there's so much more, but
yeah,
it's one of my favorite career placements to analyze. I love all the invitations you have around like checking in with yourself or with your child. I guess, well, nobody's probably 9. Inviting your child to like check in with who they are. But if anybody's 27 or about to turn, you know, you're in your 20s, you're about to enter 27, what is it like to do that same check as a parent would to a child of, okay, so what am I doing? What are the actions that I'm doing? Are they aligned with who I'm becoming? And like Haley said, like, who am I surrounding myself with? Are they building me up? And I feel like this is good prep work for Saturn return.
100%. Yes, yes. And we will go back in order in terms of development. Mercury's retrograde, what are words? But we will go back in time. But I do just want to highlight 27 because it is fascinating in terms of rite of passage. We all know Saturn return, which happens around 28, but we have these preparatory energies because people will assign, if you've heard of the 27 Club, are you familiar with that?
I'm sorry. I believe it's like Amy Winehouse and Kurt Cobain. Like there's been a few really famous people that passed away around.
And some people will say, oh, it's because it's before Saturn return, which I'm not saying that it's not that, but 27 is a very loaded time in terms of rite of passage that we go through in that it's a nodal reversal. And there's other components to it beyond the crossroads that we're speaking of. It also could be a time that you pull from like past life qualities with the energy, but again, an awareness of what needs to be let go of. Also, and I know this is your zone of genius, also what happens around that time is our first progressed lunar return. Did you want to speak on that?
Yeah, so basically, also I'm just thinking about how so many of those people like passed away at that like height of their creative talents.
Yes.
Like you were just talking about pulling like the South Node talent, I think is very interesting. And yeah, so right around 27, you have what is called like a progressed lunar return. And essentially it's when that progressed moon that we were talking about earlier that moves every 2.5 years comes back home to where it was when you were born. And it will spend, like I said, it spends 2.5 years in that sign. So it's not going to be like directly conjunct your moon that whole time. That might be an interesting day or week or however long. I can't remember what that would be in this chart, but however long period it's exactly conjunct would be an interesting time to go back and retrospect later. But throughout that whole time, we're coming back home to yourself and to your home frequency. And it can be this like reawakening. My teacher, Rebecca Gordon, says it's like you reawaken to why your soul incarnated on this earth. It's pretty big deal. You're like, okay, like, oh, like this is why I'm here. And I feel like personally that could be a remembrance of something from the past, or it could be a remembrance of something that you consciously knew you wanted to do as a kid, I launched this podcast when I turned 27. And when I was a kid, I remember staying home from school and being bad and watching Nick at Night or watching like whatever was playing on Nickelodeon. And for some reason, they would play reruns of Chelsea Handler's late night show. And I would like watch it, and I would literally think to myself, I want to do that. Like I literally just want to do that. I want to sit with people all day on TV. Not that I never want to be famous, and I still don't. I'm a projector in human design. It's not like that. But like I want to get paid to talk to people all day and have it filmed in some way and like shared with people. And she's a comedian. Who knows? Maybe my comedy era hasn't arrived yet. Maybe someday it will. But I do love that. Like it's just as an example of we're coming back.
And I also want to highlight on progressed lunar return is that it can be a time around, what am I here for? And coming back to our roots, I love that. Like that is exactly what you're doing. Like you watching Chelsea Handler, like you are sitting on a couch talking to people. Like it's so beautiful to like witness those soul nudges and experiences that just remind us that this has been something that we've felt pulled towards, and like there's just a knowing or like an inner knowing of what we feel drawn towards, and sometimes what it is that we create. There's so many roots of what we desired when we were younger, what we saw. Chelsea Handler's also a full moon baby.
Really?
Yeah, she's a Pisces sun, Virgo moon, Virgo rising, like me. Yeah, we have the same.
Chelsea Handler.
And also with that progressed lunar return, the reason I brought up explicitly 27 Club and just, yes, them passing away at the height of their talent is that the biggest thing with the progressed lunar return is that moon is our emotion. So again, could be coming back to what is it that I'm here for, awakening of even our intuition, awareness of our intuition. And it's also really calling into question like self-soothing and nourishment. And so a lot of times during progressive lunar return, there can be a review around how it is that we nurture ourselves and take care of ourselves. And so sometimes with progressive lunar return, if we are seeking to escape from certain themes or not dealing with our emotions, a lot of times that gets very loud and very pronounced at that time. And it's either we release like kind of the bad habits or the vices at that time, or sometimes like an example of those particular artists, like sometimes it could be a time where that's like very acute or very relevant. And I know for my journey, like again, it's your progressed moon aligns with it. So like I'm a Virgo moon. So it kind of made me look at a lot of the Virgo moon energy and like the ways that was showing up in not ideal ways, not loving ways, not nourishing ways. And it was really supportive around my growth because I shifted in order to make it truly nourishing for my own being. So it does kind of make you look at also your emotional responses and reactions to things, and it can be powerful for evolving beyond that as well.
I'm curious if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah.
What house your moon is in.
12.
Yeah, so it's like the 12th, 6th house, like kind of themes. Wow. That's really powerful.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak more to that? Or do you want to keep it private?
Sure, I can speak more to it. Absolutely.
I think it's cool to like give examples because whether somebody's parenting somebody or somebody's experiencing something, we can see, oh, like how did other people alchemize this transit?
100%. I think, and I also want to highlight my Virgo moon is right on Chiron. It conjoins Chiron in the 12th house. And so there was definitely an energy prior to 27. I mean, obviously, Virgo energy is going to be very perfectionistic. And there was just an awareness around 27, around like this driving feeling of like and that kind of reached a head in 27 where it's like this can no longer continue because there's ways in which we can strive for perfection or like Virgo core theme of it's really around control. So wanting to like control my body, control my work or what have you. And it just became a time around, okay, this might be perfect, but it is not healthy and it is not nourishing. So I really shifted, and rather than connecting to my Virgo moon in a way around like controlling my reality, it was really around grounding like the other elements of Virgo. Like I got more into nutrition, I got into plants, I got into nature and like things that are truly nourishing. It was such a transformative like time within my life, but people didn't necessarily see it was all happening within here.
Thanks for sharing with that.
Yeah.
I feel like you gave yourself a hug.
Yes.
That's the vibe I saw. Like kind of like, you know, our moon is like our emotional waters, and like how a question that I like to ask with the moon energy is like, how can you parent yourself? Yes. How can you parent yourself? And I love that you were like, okay, like let's take away the shadow aspects of this sign and let's connect to the light aspects and see what healing and nourishment is there.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on from the 27 Club, what is our next rite of passage? We ended at age 9.
So a big one that we experience at 12, we also experience it at 24 and 36. This is a very exciting one, and one that you will likely hear about is your first Jupiter return. At least the one in 12 is your first one, and then your second Jupiter return is 24. And the simplest way to understand Jupiter return, and often what you'll hear referred to, is that it can be a very lucky time. It can be a more auspicious time because Jupiter is returning to where it is within your birth chart. But it's also a time around education when we think about Jupiter energy. So even thinking 12 around that time, at least for my schooling, which I'm not saying is the same for everybody, but that was like the first time when I was able to start picking like classes that I wanted to take. Like that was the time that I decided that I was taking Spanish. Like it was the first time we had elective classes. Like Jupiter return is this energy around what am I interested in, as well as with Jupiter return, it can be a time of awards, recognition. And so even if we think of that in terms of getting different like awards, recognition, trophies, like within schooling, things like this, like with Jupiter return, it can be auspicious. We would really want to look to the sign in the house to understand where blessings are coming in or where there's this openness. And there also just can be this energy around this more open energy towards life and towards experiences altogether. And that will, of course, take different shape from age 12 to age 24. But around age 12, you may observe, if you're raising littles around that age, that there's an energy around wanting to expand, wanting to explore, wanting to learn, wanting to be open in some sort of way.
What advice do you have for us parents on how we can hold space for our children during 12 and 20?
So I would say around those ages, it's such an ideal time. And 12, I get that that's kind of pushing it, but I would say it is very helpful around traveling, firstly. I think that's such a deadline. Like even my example around starting to take electives and like learning Spanish and how that set me up to travel later in life. Just this energy of openness, like the world's bigger than my own backyard. That can show up absolutely around documentaries and education and museums and like expanding them and showing them more of the world, as well as, potentially learning a different language to set them up to travel. There's an ability to, at 24, to travel. I mean, such an amazing time to like connect. It also can be very aligned around education. What do I enjoy learning about? As well as with Jupiter, what is it? Because Jupiter is a planet that's around faith and optimism, which a lot of times can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So even say if your children are in school or rather sports or creative expression, like contemplating like, what if it all went right? Like even supporting them around driving to soccer practice, around like visualize yourself making the goal, like see it within your mind, because Jupiter can also be very spiritual, but it's even just like creative visualization. Like, what if it all went right? Like, what sort of awards would you want? Like, even inspiring them to dream bigger.
I love that advice. Thank you. Did you travel when you were 24?
I did. Yeah.
I did too. I'm noticing that. Yeah, I'm like, whoa. I shouldn't say only went to Panama, but I went to Panama, and that was the first time I went to foreign country to have fun as a child. Because I had just been on like community service trips before that. So it's so funny to hear that. I'm like, oh, I love 24. Like 24 was a good year for me. I never had that too. Like, comment below, like, was 24 a good year for you? For me, I decided maybe this is too much Jupiter excess as the shadow. I was like, well, I don't have to make a savings account until I turn 25. And like my frontal, I kept telling myself, I was like, when I turn 25, that's when I have to start saving. So I'm lucky that I checked myself and didn't get into a bunch of debt. I pretty much was just spending all my money. So I was like, I'm going to go to Panama. I wanted a surf trip and I don't surf. And I did one lesson. I got to my hands and knees. I did not surf, but it was still a really cool experience. Where did you go?
So what was fascinating, and this was like, it was so interesting. Well, firstly, I will just highlight, like 24, I was going to a lot of music festivals, which not necessarily like traveling abroad at that particular time, besides Costa Rica. I went to Costa Rica when I was 24. I went to a lot of festivals. I was like very open. Like,
I do feel like festivals are very Jupiter though.
Yes. Oh, 100%. Yes. Definitely a combination of that. Also, I remember seeing my Jupiter return approach and was like, what's going to happen when it gets to the exact day? And it was, my Jupiter is placed in the sign Scorpio. And so I was like looking to see when the degree would exact. And the literal day that it exacted was when I got the call that I was getting like hired at my yoga studio. Like I had been in the program and like I just auditioned, and like the day that my Jupiter return exacted was when, and that also makes sense because it's in my third house. But again, it was like my education paying off and just this new openness and this new even just exploration as it relates to my like intuition and faith. And yeah, there were some traveling, some festivals, some definite excess at that time. I do want to highlight around 24, and this is a topic that's so wide and varied that it literally could be 24 podcast episodes, but I do just want to like plant this seed here for anybody where this could be helpful. Because another theme for any, AstroMamas out there, anyone who's looking at their children's progressions and just want to like support them more, there is also perfection years, which is a technique that's pulled from the Hellenistic tradition, and it basically emphasizes a different house for every year, and 23 is a 12th house perfection year. And it's interesting because you'll hear a lot of people talk about 23 being a pretty challenging year, and then 24 because again 24 corresponds to a first house perfection year and your Jupiter return. So a lot of people will have challenging experience with 23. I know I most certainly did. And then 24, it's like I want to expand, I want to explore, I want to be open. So it's interesting even tracking it that way as well.
Thanks for bringing that tool up. That is really cool to look at it that way.
So we've navigated our Jupiter return around age 12, and the next major rite of passage is Saturn opposition, which I did mention briefly earlier when we were talking about Saturn 7. So we had the opening Saturn square at age 7, and now we have Saturn opposing where Saturn is placed within the natal chart, and it's a halfway point to our Saturn return, which happens around age 28. So our first Saturn opposition happens at 14. What also happens at 14 is our first Uranus sextile our natal Uranus. And it's interesting that these coincide because Saturn opposition is this energy around I'm feeling controlled, I'm feeling told what to do. There is energetic differences between a square and an opposition. Just to simplify, I'll just highlight that oppositions emphasize differences. So there can be this energy around things feel harder, feel more challenging. There's also this emphasizing a difference around this is who I'm being told to be and this is who I am. These feel hard, like an energy around not feeling understood can come up, especially when we consider Uranus sextile Uranus, as Uranus is a planet around rebellion. It's a planet around wanting to do things different. So it tends to be a time in which we can feel more controlled, and there's this energy around, you don't understand me, mom, like with our emo haircuts or like our music or things like that. It tends to be an energy where there's definitely a focus around individuality with Uranus sextile Uranus, around rebelling by dressing differently, maybe listening to different music or things like that. And again, there could be an enhanced emphasis upon people trying to what would you tell you what to do? Or authoritarians getting in the way of your own development with that Saturn opposition also?
Gosh, wow. Who liked being 14? Like, I don't know if anybody, I didn't like being 14, but I do remember the angst and I appreciate that reflection. My second Saturn opposition was crazy, but we'll talk about that another time. It's a podcast for another time. Changed my whole life though. So yeah, near-death experience with the whole like thing was wild. However, anyway, so I wanted to say though, I was just thinking when you were talking, I was imagining a little one in front of me that was 14 having their, moment. I was picturing a kid almost being like, this isn't me. And I was thinking about asking, like, what do I want to ask them? I'd say, like, okay, so who is you? Like, okay. I would say, okay, who are you? So who are you right now?
Yeah.
And like, I'm sure that's probably would be challenging to hear during those times, but that will probably be an evolving definition throughout that opposition, or sorry, throughout that square. Yeah, it's like, okay, like let's sit down and let's think about this. Like I don't have to fight you on who you are. I don't have to hold you to who you've been, because I feel like love is letting people evolve into who you are. So how can I honor the part of me that's triggered that my child is changing? Like, we don't like it when, not that we don't like it when a child changes, but you get used to parenting your child in a certain way and then they change. There's a toddler that's happened like 6 times. So I'm assuming that that's going to happen a lot, like as our children age. Let me just sit with what's coming up for me, but let me just be present with you and who you're becoming.
That's beautifully said. And I feel that around that energy around who are you, and again, sometimes we find that clarity in contrast. The biggest thing with oppositions, it's the furthest that it could possibly be. So there's a lot of contrast that comes up at that period. And sometimes we do find who it is that we are by who it is that we're, in a sense, around. Sometimes there is, when Uranus energy could be this desire to rebel. And when we even think of just like counterculture around like, mom, that's not cool, or like, that's not whatever it is, or just even like looking at things that are mainstream and just being like, oh, I'm so different. And again, by bouncing off of that, we kind of tune into just nuances around, I like to express myself in this way. And yes, sometimes it could show up as angsty around and being told I have to wear pink or I have to do this or what have you. And sometimes there's like angst around no one understands me, but it's this energy around, especially with Uranus, sextile Uranus, almost like trying on, how is it that you like to dress? Like what feels very true and in alignment with you? And I would just say to parents with the Saturn opposition is that yes, it's natural at this time around whether it's like, I feel like school's trying to tell me what to do or society or what have you, there just could be an awareness around how that's being controlled or hindered in some way. But again, it also creates this environment around knowing that like you have autonomy over yourself and you can express yourself in the ways that you want to. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be as burdensome of a time, especially if it's viewed through that exploratory lens.
Thank you, Haley. Yeah, that's good. Good stuff. So we're angsty, rebellious. Where are we going next?
So age 18, 2 very major rites of passage occur. The first is we experience our first nodal return. So this is different from the nodal reversal, which happened at age 9, which is like crossroads, sometimes like decisions, letting go of things that we're serving or pausing, what have you, dialing into where we're going. With nodal return, it tends to be a time, and this also will coincide 18 years later as well, but it tends to be a time in which things are aligning in order to launch us forward or to step into our life's purpose or things like this. We also experience at age 18 first Saturn, or rather, we experience a Saturn trine. And so with the energy of the Saturn trining, so the Saturn was opposing Saturn, and now it's like having its waning trine on this side. And the biggest thing with Saturn trine is that it's like this energy of flow. And so we even just think around age 18, a lot of like, I guess, teenagers at that age are asked, like, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to contribute to this world? And like with Saturn trine being pushed to like go out of our comfort zone with the nodal return in order to find that, as well as like to define that, to crystallize it. It can be an awareness of responsibility. So some individuals will move out at that time or go to college, like decide what it is that they want to do at that age. And again, nodal return really does support our launching forward, regardless if we do go to college, trade, what have you. There just is an energy where with nodal return, in big ways or small ways, we do tend to be launched out of our comfort zone and towards something that will help our development.
Yeah, it's almost like, okay, like just start.
Yeah.
And then you'll have other returns and reversals throughout your life, so you can always like revisit like what that path is later. But you have to like get going on one path before you realize what the right one is for you.
Totally.
Any advice for our, end of high school, early college, trade school life children?
I think it's really fascinating to have this conversation and to think about each of these rites of passage. Because as I highlighted, with that age 14, with that Saturn opposition, it's a lot of butting up against society and authority. And now Saturn's trining, so it's harmonious. So it's like, rather than just like resisting and just being like, everything's lame, no one understands, like Saturn trining is like, where do I want to make a difference? Where do I want to like crystallize things or build towards things? It's more of a flow of energy. Because again, we can say all day, everything's the worst and no one understands me, but Saturn trine is like, where is it that I want to make other people feel understood? Or what do I want to be my legacy? Or what do I want to create? So I'd say it's knowing that Saturn is not the enemy. Like, obviously, we're both astrologers, like malefics. We don't love to always, work with it, but they have an important role.
Yeah.
And with Saturn energy, it's a role around what is it that you want to build? What are you committing to? I mean, a lot of people around age 18 make a big commitment, whether that's by way of like student loans or trade school or like, and again, I think I love what you highlighted around it's continually ongoing. Went to school at that time, and I most certainly am not working in the career that I got my major in, but it was important for both of our, development.
Sure.
Like I'm glad that there was so much that I learned during that time around like, moving out and even just the discipline that I chiseled around, going to school. And I also just think about that time around, and I'm not at all implying that everybody needs to go that route, but just with Saturn trine is the time around, wow, it's on me now. And like, what are the rules that I want to stick to and like commit to? Because it's like when I was in high school, it was very da-da. Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, it's on me. If I don't do my classwork, it's on me. So I'd say the best advice that you could give is to like really around what is it that you want to contribute? And you don't need to know it all right now, but it's like, what feels really right now that you want to build, that you want to like ascend towards. It also can be a really aligned time to kind of inspire them around tools, around like this word, but like adulting, like budgeting or routines, things like that, like befriending Saturn, because Saturn is a very necessary part of our life. So this would be a really nice time to like empower them around like setting up certain savings accounts or budgeting or certain like routines, rituals, like teaching them even how to cook or provide for themselves or like get the electricity turned on, where like it's supporting them with those tools so that they feel empowered moving onward and really like building their lives from this point onward.
I love that. I'm hearing you saying like give them space to figure things out with your guidance of how to do it. You know what I mean? It's like you're not like at their shoulders the whole time being like you're doing it wrong or whatever, but you're like, hey, who else is going to tell them? Like, hey, if you make a choice to go to school, for example, you're taking student loans, this is what you're going to pay. Or, hey, if you're going to buy a house or rent an apartment, like, don't forget to budget for, I don't know, housework or whatever. Like, I love that reflection. I know people have different takes on the malefics and whether or not you can, make their impact lighter or not. And like, who knows? Like, the person knows that is like universe God.
Yes.
And Saturn himself or themselves or herself or whatever. But I always think about with Saturn energy being like a professor at that or a teacher, where if you suck at math, you suck at math. It is what it is. But if you go to the office hours every day and you do your homework on time, they usually will pass you. Doesn't mean that they're going to give you an A. It doesn't mean that like they're going to give you a college recommendation, but they'll say, okay, this person's giving great. At least that was my experience. Like, this person's showing up, so I'm going to pass them.
Yeah, 100%. That is really what Saturn asks for, is consistency. It asks for commitment and really being willing to work on it, learn on it. Again, with that Saturn opposition, it's a lot around trying to control me or tell me what to do. And like with opposition, just like hiding of differences. But with Saturn trine, it's like these are necessary components of this reality. Like, how can we befriend these aspects where it's not like fighting against it? It's just like witnessing, maybe we will need math for some things or budgeting for these things. And it's such a delicate balance around this age because nodal return really like implies this energy of getting out of your comfort zone, departing, like launching forward, stepping into new gifts, stepping into new talents. And with Saturn trine, like, of course, as a caregiver, you want to like support them with the tools, but like ultimately with Saturn energy, it's like, what is it that you are going to build? Because you can lead them towards these things, but ultimately it's on them to like arise to the occasion. So I think it's a delicate balance around this time around knowing, like, supporting them around creating these structures and knowing that ultimately it's theirs to go to office hours, so to speak. After 18, I do want to highlight, since we're talking about Saturn, I do want to share that our next Saturn square happens at age 21. And it was interesting because I thought of this earlier when you were talking about, boss baby, or just like, baby like in a suit. And I was just like thinking about age 21 and how that shows up at that time with the second, because the some people will call it the first quarter Saturn square, and this is the last quarter Saturn square, or you could think of it as the waxing Saturn square, the waning, whatever you think about it, just the second Saturn square now on this side, the last Saturn 7 before Saturn return at 28. And I thought of that because I feel like that was so aligned in my journey at that time, just getting an internship, like working a 9 to 5. I'm like, who is allowing me to do this? Because you still feel like you're young, but there's this energy when, whoa, I'm an adult. Like, with the Saturn trine, it's like, this is great being adult because I have freedom. Like, I'm able to stay up if I want to. Like, I deal with consequences. Like, yes, there is learning around that, but Saturn trine is more harmonious. 21, it's like, whoa, things are getting real. Like, I remember, like, being at my first corporate job and just like, oh my gosh, I have an email address and like a business card, like at this internship. And it's like, who allowed me to do this? I feel like I'm like playing a role. Did you feel any of that around like age 21?
Yeah, wow. I love that you said like, who allowed me to do this? I love that. You're like, what am I doing? Like, and I could see like young Haley like going out into like representing this company and being like, I'm sure you crushed it. But also that internal, like, well, like, am I here? Like, and maybe part of that question is like, nobody wants to hear us from 21. I'm 28, and I look back at 21, and I'm like, I was still a baby, so But when I was 21, I had a crazy life experience up to that point, I guess. Yeah, that's when I started my coaching business, and I was shocked that I knew I was like well trained in the modality. Like, I was young, but like I had skills to use, like, to help people. I was surprised that the people I attracted were so much bigger. So I had people that were in like their 40s and 50s that I was coaching at 21. First of all, I didn't think a lot of them even knew that I was 21. Like, not that I was a secret, but I wasn't. Just like, yourself with your age. Was pushing against as a woman in our culture. But there were times where I was like, I'm crushing it. And there are times where I was like, who? Like, I'm a baby in a suit. And then actually at the end of that, like a couple of years later, right around my 23. Or 24, that was when I went back to school again for coaching, and I got hired to be a mentor there. And I was still also young. I feel like I was mentoring older people, but at least I had some more experience now. But I had that of like, who qualified me to do this? But I was, I guess. Yeah. Also, you don't feel like you have this, you do have some education usually, or some sort of training, or whatever it is you're doing under your belt. But you're also like, get those baby legs. So, am I actually qualified to do this?
It's so interesting because it's like with the Saturn energy, it's like, yes, I've built towards this. Like, again, you're 3/4 of the way through this Saturn cycle. Like, there's lots that's been learned and refined, and all of these things. But like with Saturn square, there tends to be this like kind of discomfort. And even just like bring it back to the first Saturn square, age 7, and how we were showing around the bathroom door open and the tutu, like there's just certain, even just transitions to like being a professional or stepping into some sort of trade or whatever comes up, where it's like there's certain there's certain decorum, there's certain codes of conduct, there's certain like tact that are necessary for like stepping into these environments. Sometimes with Saturn square, it's like we sign off emails like this, or like, oh, this is how I meant to act at this like business happy hour. There's like an awareness of these particular themes outside of ourselves, and awareness around where it is that we fit within this. And yes, I mean, 21, obviously, in lots of places, that is a time in which people are, you're still a baby, you're still very young. But with the Saturn square, there's just like an energy and an awareness around, oh, things are getting more real now. So like, even if there was an alternative path and someone decided they didn't want to go to college, they wanted to go something different, like around 21, there just could be this energy around really feeling this energy around what do I want to do with my life, and perhaps feeling the pressure and the responsibility of that.
I love that. Like, I know it's hard, but it's also like the awareness of like, the pressure and responsibility. And I think that's why maybe when we are 21, we hate being called babies. Yeah. Like, I used to hate people be like, oh my God, you're just a baby. Because I'd be like, what? I feel all this pressure. Like, at the same time, it's like I have all this responsibility. Paying bills, I'm paying rent now. Yeah. Maybe I'm a baby, but also maybe I'm not. So I love that. So how do we help our 21-year-old kids as they head into our last rite of passage that we're going to talk about at least today, which is the Saturn return?
So I would say when it comes to this final, like that age from 21 to 28, and it really is a time with this being the final Saturn square, it's around what is it that I am committed to and building. And again, there's like a little bit of an adjustment period. And it's just really knowing, because I love it when clients come to me before their Saturn return, because I feel like there's so much value before a Saturn return. Like, obviously, I love when anyone comes to me, but I feel like particularly getting your ducks in a row before a Saturn return, because I had a really lovely Saturn return. I think a lot of people will demonize it. Then again, Saturn's on my sun, so I've been working with Saturn since day one. But and I really think it's this energy around where is it that you are aware of what Saturn's teaching you, and knowing like it's your work. Like if you don't show up for it, like no one's going to make you do it. And like with the Saturns, where there is this awareness around like society at large, and it's like really deciding what is it that I want to build, what is it that I want to create, and what is it that I'm like learning here, transitioning into this next season. I do want to briefly highlight before the Saturn return that we also go through Pluto sextile Pluto between like 25 to 28, which is a lot around our psyche, our inner mentality. So I feel like both of those transits, the Saturn square and the Pluto sextile Pluto, it's a lot of discovery. I mean, our 20s are so rich just around figuring out, what's it all about? And I feel like particularly with that Pluto sextile Pluto, it's like really going deep into our inner reservoirs and really like seeking to evolve or transcend, or even just being aware around how patterns from our childhood have affected us now. And with Pluto energy, where it's we're evolving beyond it. Because with Saturn energy, it just really brings those themes to the forefront.
Thank you for bringing that back in. That slipped my mind, that Pluto sextile, Pluto transit that we mentioned before. And what I'm feeling right now is Pluto is one of the rulers of Scorpio.
Yeah.
And it's this like invitation for Pluto represents that like death, rebirth, transformation. I also love how like in animal totems, like Scorpio has 3, because it's like there's like these different, like I love Scorpio energy. It's like it has like, we have these 3 different ways that we can like be born again and transform. And I love how between 25 and 28, we're getting like stretched into like, okay, so like really now who are you? And I don't think there's any like mistakes in the way that the divine created this earth and our solar system and the stars and our relationship to it. Because why wouldn't we go through that right before a Saturn return? And I love that you said Saturn return prep work. So as we start talking about the Saturn return, do you have like maybe 1 to 3 questions a parent could ask their child during those years to prep them for their Saturn return? I have some ideas. If I can start, which I was thinking like learning your child's Saturn is a good help tool. Like learn what it is, what sign it's in, what house it's in, is making aspects to any of their natal planets. And as you get to know your child, you get to know like their natural relationship with Saturn, and maybe like kind of present that to them or with them, have a conversation with them around whatever area of that life is, and say like, so how do you think, like, let's say that they're having a Saturn return in the 6th house. And I want to give an aspect because I want to make sure it would be an accurate representation. So obviously this would be different based on whatever aspect it was making in their chart. What is your like relationship right now with, health and wellness and your body and your routines, your habits? Do you like, going to Pilates? Do you like eating a vegetarian diet? Do you like, having a paper calendar or like stuff like that, and just kind of see like where they're at with what their current experience is and whatever their relationship is with Saturn, and then like also where do they want to grow and like change, and kind of like identifying that with them beforehand. Maybe we can be like their accountability partners of like, never pushing an agenda on them, of course, like that being like, okay, yeah, let me know how that goes. Like text me after, you try CrossFit, and let me know if you like it better, and see what's there.
And it really, I think, particularly viewing that in the lens around empowering their sovereignty and autonomy around these Saturn themes. So like, how do you like CrossFit? And again, if you want this to happen, if you want to feel more fit or more in alignment with your body, like really empowering them around them showing up for it. Because a lot of times with Saturn return, it's like recognizing, whoa, like the responsibility is in my hands. If I don't like something, it is on me to change it. And that will take, of course, nuanced shapes and forms based on the sign and house that Saturn is in, as well as the aspects it's making. But with Saturn return, it's just this awareness around what we've built thus far. And essentially, it's in our hands around how it is that we want to proceed forward and onward. Saturn return, another question I would empower you if you're in it, or if you have a child who's going through it or approaching it, is this question around their relationship with time, which I know sounds strange, but like Saturn return makes us very aware of time, how we're spending it, where it's going towards, as well as age, people aging, like what it is that we have built thus far. And so also just like seeing how it is that they have psychologically, again, right after the Pluto sextile, Pluto can be very deep and intense and around, death and rebirth. And sometimes there just could be this awareness around, maybe my parents are getting older or my grandparents maybe like passed away, or there's just an awareness around time is going by. How do I want to spend it? Sometimes Saturn return can get really existential because it's like people are, and it really is a time to kind of like check in around that. And I always think if we understand death fully, we understand life and we seize it. And like with Saturn return energy, if you don't like something within your life, you have to change it. Like this time is yours to spend, as well as like really just witnessing time and age and seeing where that can be framed in a more empowering lens rather than a fearful, because sometimes there's an energy around almost being scared to live because Saturn returns can be hard sometimes. Sometimes if we like free ourselves around, like, no, this time is precious. Like if I'm scared of losing you or losing someone on this planet, like I should really prioritize this moment even more deeply.
Wow. Live like you're dying.
Yeah.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
That was really like touching. I started my Saturn return this year, and it's in the first house.
Wow.
And I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I was like, I'm starting to notice that I'm aging.
Yeah.
And there's so much more life to live and like whatever.
Yeah.
We can get into like a whole nother conversation around society's weird aging and
Yeah.
time. But I was like noticing, for the first time, like wrinkles on my skin and certain things, and I was like, this is interesting. And again, it showed up like in this existential, like you mentioned, of like, it wasn't insecurity, it was more like the clock is ticking.
Right.
Like timekeeper. It's like, clock is ticking, girl. Like, what do you want to do? So I really appreciate that. And I'm just like holding that. Like, I know I'm laughing, but I'm also with Sagittarius moon, like I like to make light of my existentialism. But, and also I still do have the existentialism. But I feel like, I don't know, it's like interesting, like the reverence too of like, time's going to keep moving. So what do we want to do? And then that pressure of Saturn being like, I'm going to support you in coming close to or as connected to your sovereign expression of the chart that you chose to be incarnated in with that purpose that you chose. And whatever that expresses is, because there's never like a total like it has to be this exact purpose, but there's like this window or kind of like this realm.
Yes.
The possibility that is most aligned with the natal promise.
And I just want to highlight in reference to the Saturn return, another question that I would pose, or even just contemplation, because I just really want to get this out there and scream to the rooftops.
Get it out.
That Saturn return can be a really amazing time. Like genuinely, it was like I had worked so hard, because with Saturn return, it can be a time of reaping what it is that you've sown, which of course can show up around I was neglecting or avoiding certain areas of my life, and now it's like very apparent, it's very there. But it also can show up in a way around if you've been really doing your due diligence, especially in the sign or the house or the placement around it, it can really be a time that you are being rewarded by Saturn. Again, it won't round up your grade or anything like that, but like with the energy of Saturn being a professor, technically Jupiter's a professor, but we take the analogy around that. It's an energy around like, if you do your due diligence, like you can be rewarded. It can show up in very like physical, material ways. And so I also just want to say that because a lot of people will be like, oh my gosh, my life is ending. It's my Saturn return. But I'm like, my love, it's just beginning. Like it really is a time where a lot of your experiences crystallize in this really powerful way where, for me at least, going into my Saturn return, it was so much of my experiences up to that point. It made so much sense. Even like the uncomfortable ones or the Saturn energy makes us sometimes look at really hard stuff. But I just saw, wow, that perfectly prepared me for this and this prepared me for this and all of that to build the foundation of where I'm at now. And it was a time where finally things were like really beginning to like solidify and crystallize within my life. So I just don't want people to fear Saturn return. It could be a very beautiful portal and rite passage, truly.
Haley, did you notice like any themes from that second Saturn square come up again during your Saturn return?
Yes, I did. It's interesting to think about because when we were talking about that second Saturn square, I was in college living in a sorority house with 35, 40
What sorority
women.
were you?
I was in Kappa Delta.
I was at Delta Gamma.
Oh my gosh. At CSU?
No.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I transferred to San Diego State. Started for that time. I was at Delphi on Long Island.
Okay.
I transferred my third year.
Oh my gosh. Wait, I love that. Oh my gosh. I didn't realize that. Okay.
That's so funny.
So I always joke, like at that time I was I was studying public relations and I didn't like it. But I was like already too far in. I was at this internship working for this tech company. But I always joke when I talk about that time, I was like, I minored in astrology. Because basically in order to like just make money to like buy beer or food or whatever, I would just read everybody in the sorority house's charts. I would read like the guys that they were dating. I was reading everybody's charts, but like just for fun, just like make money for food and stuff. Or I would just be like, oh yeah, just buy me a taco, whatever, I'll read your chart. And I was like, I got so much practice. I was not doing it professionally. It's always just been my nerdy hobby. And so it was like my safe space around, I was working at this internship in like San Francisco and having to like travel all the time. And it was like this weirdly professional thing, but I was like this sorority girl. I was like, what is this? What is happening? But anyways, I just mentioned that because at that Sound and Square, it was like astrology was my safe space and just something I did for fun. And it was like to navigate some of the responsibilities that we're building. And then obviously like during my Saturn return was when a lot of that crystallized, because I never set out to be an astrologer. It was never something that I was like, I'm going to do this. It was like, I've studied it my whole life. It was always my nerdy little hobby. It was my party trick. It was how I would like earn a beer or two, whatever, if I needed to. And so it was just fascinating to see with the Saturn return, just how I was being so prepared and like even just certain elements around that internship and learning just like PR and themes like that and how that like set me up around certain elements of owning my own business or like understanding marketing or things like that. I just saw how everything was aligning me. And again, Saturn energy can make things very hard, and Saturn's also around time. So there can also be an energy around like either time's going by or what have you. And with the Saturn return, I just saw how everything was aligning for me to be in that particular part.
Beautiful, Haley. Beautiful, Haley. Well, thank you for sharing more about your story. I have full body chills. I'm curious for anybody who wants to work with you. I know that you're not exchanging readings for tacos anymore, but I will have to connect after this because I had some similar experiences. It was tripping me out a little bit. Yeah, but anyway, my degree is in journalism and media studies. And I was like, I'm never going to use this, but then I ended up using it to make content.
Yes!
So it's like,
God,
well,
I love that.
Would also read people's birth charts at parties and stuff like that. Entrepreneurial Haley was still like, okay, there's got to be some kind of energy exchange. Like, I love that. But anyway, so how can people pay you in dollars, but how can people work with you if they want to?
So at this particular moment, my one-on-one calendar is closed for the time being, but I do have other opportunities to work with me coming out very soon that will be listed on selfcareastrology.com. I have containers, group classes, environments. I'm just really feeling called by Aquarius placements. I just think there's so much power in bringing people together, and I love my one-on-one conversations, but it's just so fascinating, just the wavelengths of us all being connected and core themes. So a lot of my work at this particular moment, what's feeling really aligned is shifting to group classes and environment and collective. So check out selfcareastrology.com and you'll see all of that.
Love it. I love the containers that you create. I love everything you do. Like I said earlier, literally like finding you, I think in 2020, I found Magic Monday and it like really opened up and confirmed my childhood and teenage desire to explore astrology. Yeah, I love the way that you teach in such a relatable way. I love how you're vulnerable and sharing about your journey. I love how accessible you are with your offerings, the community that you're creating with Self-Care Astrology, your YouTube. I just love how inclusive you are, even in the language in your videos. Like, it just feels really affirming to me to get to receive your content. I'm just so grateful for all the work that you do in the world, and I'm really excited for this new container or this new group of people or whoever joins Self-Care Astrology as it continues to grow and blossom. I know I'm definitely considering joining, so I'm really excited. And just thank you for what you do. Thank you all for listening. Mamas, AstroMamas, we want to hear from you. Comment in the comments below. Let us know if anything resonated. Let us know whatever you feel comfortable sharing publicly, I guess. If there's any alignment with your little ones or if there's any tips that stood out to you. And if there's anything that, not that we forgot, but if there's another tip you want to pass on to another AstroMama that we didn't talk about for a certain phase, if you're feeling it, go ahead. We are all in this together in this Aquarian age. And thank you for listening.